You're listening to the Living Adventures podcast, a lifestyle podcast hosted by ashleymielke and Victoriavance. Tune in for a new episode every Thursday to hear our honest conversations about topics like freedom, creativity, spirituality, luxury living, health and wellness, and above all else, building community.
We have real and unfiltered conversations inspired by our search to feel connected to people who give a shit about us, support our dreams, and understand our struggles. Our mission is to provide you with the tools, guidance, and motivation to navigate any moment in your life with the lens of your neurodivergent mind, with a community who gets you. Adventure on. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Living Adventures podcast. It's your host here, Ashley Mielke, with
Victoriavance.
And today we are so excited because we have created the most amazing thing ever to help you make decisions that are really hard and do it in a way that is intuitive and not as reactional.
Yes, and Bo is also here because he refuses to sit anywhere else in my apartment besides on this chair with me right next to the microphone.
And he will be sniffing the microphone, apparently. I can hear him licking his lips. Ew, Bo, please stop.
Anyways. Chill, my homie. Everybody, for the past 2 days, Ashley and I have been extremely sick. That's how this week started off for us, and we're coming around here to turn it around.
Yeah, and then probably go take a nap after, but I am feeling way better than the beginning of the week.
Oh, yeah. I am feeling, I thought I was literally going to die. I did not see any end in the light. And even during the time that I felt like that, I still was questioning if I was being dramatic while going to the ER to get IV bags.
No, it's so accurate because even me, I was just telling you that, like, I wasn't deathly ill, but, you know, my body was winded when I was walking around my apartment and my throat hurt really bad and my face hurt because it was so congested, but snot wasn't pouring out of my nose. So I'm like, it's not that bad, right? And I swear, if I was still in my 9 to 5, I would have gone to work because I wasn't disgusting, but I was in pain, but I would have been like, nah, it's fine. Just go to work, right? And now I kept being like, am I being dramatic? Like, should I actually rest? I'm like, no, you really need to rest. You cannot breathe when you walk around. Even like yesterday, I was like, oh, let me sit down and do something. Sitting at my desk winded me. I was like, okay, no, that was a joke. We're not working today.
You sent me a picture sitting at your desk yesterday, and I was like, why is she there?
Oh, my brain was so bored. I was so tired of doing nothing and resting.
Same.
And I was like, I need to do something creative. So I literally just edited a podcast clip so my heart could be full of something. And it felt easier than doing paint by number because I had to move less pieces of my body. But then after that, I was like, why am I winded from this? I've just been sitting here moving one arm.
I did paint number for literally 2 minutes in my bed. And then I was like, that's it. We can't do anymore. I need a nap. I sat down. Actually, this is funny because people will know this. I missed body doubling yesterday, which I canceled on Monday because I was in the hospital. But then Tuesday, I was expecting myself to go for some reason. And then I went down for a nap, and then I by accident slept for like 2.5, 3 hours. So I missed it. And people were joining and everything. And I was like, oh, sorry, I guess everybody. I mean, they're all fine. You know, it ain't going to die. They're going to be fine. But I should have canceled that. That's something I should have done, but I just didn't.
I mean, and meanwhile, I'm seeing TikToks of influencers who we just talked about last week are not sustainable in their business model. Influencers who are also sick and they look disgusting and ghostly, putting on makeup, doing a get ready with me sick edition, and talking about how they have to go to meetings. I'm like, ma'am, please cancel your meetings. And talking
about the transition that they're having from like, wow, looked how bad I looked in the beginning to how good I look in the end.
And then they're still like coughing
and sound terrible. My goodness.
But that's why I'm saying, like, when I worked my 9 to 5, I would do that. I would just slap on makeup and just go pretend I was okay. And it's like, one, not sanitary. You're going to get other people sick. But also, why is that the expectation, you know? But go listen to last week's episode and you'll find out why influencing isn't sustainable, ladies and gentlemen.
It really is not. And we both took 2 full days off, basically, except for needing to do a teeny bit of work on Tuesday to make our brains happy because we were so freaking bored, which is such a hard part of being sick, I think, with ADHD. Because that first day, I was so out of it. I mean, I didn't have a brain, so anything went. I literally sat for 5 hours dissociating in the ER before I basically even got the IV drip. I just was not conscious, honestly. But then the second day, okay, I'm watching TV, I'm napping, I'm watching TV, I'm napping, and then my brain is just bored and my brain is ready to do things, but I also doesn't necessarily have the full energy, and the gears are turning, but they're not clicking and ready to export things, and so it's still foggy, and you're not taking your meds possibly, like I wasn't, and so it's just wasn't fully there, and it's so frustrating.
Oh my gosh, I was in the same boat. Like, my body couldn't physically do anything, but my brain was on. But you're right, gears were turning, but production value is not there. It was really sad times. Even today, I worked a little bit in the morning, and I was like, whew, I'm tired, and I went to go take a long nap.
Yeah, I took a nap today. It was nice. But we're both on the mend. I did have one of those really funny ADHD moments that people talk about a lot, which I don't experience that often, but this morning I woke up and my water cup was just right outside my door and I tripped and fell on it. And I had to take a few moments and question why it was there to realize last night I went to the bathroom and I said I'm going to fill it up, and I don't like taking my cup in the bathroom because then I'm like, the toilet flushes, I don't know, like particles fly. And so I left it outside my bathroom. And then I was going to go fill it up. But I guess I didn't, and I just left it there and I didn't trip over it or anything. So that cup was just there.
No, I like that. No, I definitely had Subway one of the days, and I got chips, but I didn't eat them, and I didn't eat the whole sub, so I put them, apparently the sub and the chips, back in the fridge. And Adrian is like, why are there chips in the refrigerator? I'm like, I don't know. That doesn't count. Leave me alone.
It's like, on top of ADHD, just the sick brain too. It's like the things are not computing there, and you're just like, it just made sense at the time. Like, I moved this chair in here, and I don't remember why I did, but then I was like, oh, that would be good for recording. And my mom asked me why, and I was like, I don't know. It just felt like I had to do it in the moment, and it just felt like I just had to there, and I did.
And that's on intuition, which we will talk about today.
There was no, I don't know what the intuition was there, but we'll get into it.
LOL. Yeah. Well, yeah, we're feeling better now, so that's good, because now we can talk about our super fun topic today, which is all about the intuitive decision pathway that we have created. And Victoria, let them know a little bit of why we created this pathway.
So, I was frustrated with the way I was making decisions, which sounds kind of funny, but I always felt like it would take me such a long time to make decisions. And I've gotten better at it, but I still didn't understand my process. And I was kind of annoyed with it and trying to talk to Ashley about it. And so then Ashley just pulled out a whiteboard and said, let's figure it out. Let's, because I wrote something and then she was reading it. And she was like, this isn't good. You're missing a lot of words. I kind of understand, but like, let's work it out. And so we sat down and Ashley, I just said each things, and she kept triggering questions and asking how things happened. And then we did another version of that, and we figured out the commonalities to figure out how I make decisions, the questions I was asking myself to not make emotional decisions. We were thinking of this about emotional kind of authority in human design at first, but then we realized this is just making intuitive and non-emotional or reactive decisions, and how to make a better educated decision and how to work through this really well. And then we basically came up with our formula and how that can work with many different people and how it might feel different for everyone. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, what was really funny is when Victoria was like, I don't understand how I make decisions and I want to make them faster, she basically presented me a journal entry that she wrote, and she's like, look, I documented my process because I want to understand how I use my emotions when I make decisions. Can you read it? And I was reading through it, and there was no emotions in it at all. It was just a description of events. It was today I did this, and then this happened, and then that happened. And she's like, yeah, so do you understand the emotions? And I said, nope, I don't see them. Which, it's hard to understand your own process. And so I guess this is where coaching really helps out, because I took the paper and I was like, you said you did this. How did you feel when you did that thing? How did you feel when you did that thing? And like Victoria said, we're going to break down how we use our emotions when we make decisions, how we use our intuition, and also when our emotions take over. I know even before Victoria brought up the fact that she wanted to understand her emotions better, we have talked about seeing a lot of TikToks and content where people say, everybody's too emotional. You're using too many emotions when you're making your decision, but not really one presenting a solution on what you should do otherwise, but also not understanding that your emotions can be really important in the decision-making process. You just have to understand how to navigate them and get to a rooted place or a grounded place where your intuition is making the ultimate final decision and not those emotions. Okay. So to start this off, let's talk about how most people make decisions as it is right now in the general world. There's a lot of different ways to make decisions, but usually what happens is some kind of event happens to trigger an emotion and then people immediately react. For example, let's say I break up with my boyfriend. The emotion is, there's many of them, sadness, fear, frustration, anger, whatever the situation was. And my reaction and immediate decision might be, let me cut my hair, let me block him, let me go get a tattoo, let me, these extreme and outrageous versions of making decision that we often see. But it can also be a lot more simple. For example, whenever I was living in Ohio and I hated living in Ohio, that was my event to trigger an emotion. The feelings were frustration, a feeling of stuckness, sadness, gloom, and I didn't make an intuitive decision. Maybe it was, but it really was kind of reactional, where I said, okay, I hate Ohio. I'm never going to live in Ohio again. I'm going to run away to a college in a different state. I'm not even going to apply to a school in Ohio. I'm getting the F out of here. And I would say that was reactional because I didn't really follow any kind of process to make that decision. It was just something I did. And we'll talk about how a quick decision can be intuitive once we go through the process, but that's kind of where the majority of people lie. Big thing happens, they react.
I'm going to shift what you said. The thing about Ohio, yes, that was an emotional and reactional decision, but the cutting your hair or like getting a tattoo like post-breakup, those, yes, they are reactional to emotions. You don't necessarily have full control over those, and I don't know if it's necessarily something that you could, or if that's too high of expectations. And so I want to say, if you have those small little ones, those are completely okay. Like break up, cut your hair. That's a completely fine and normal reaction to all of that stuff. And it's normal to have all of these reactions. What we're more thinking of is like these big life-changing ones where it's like, I hate Ohio, I'm leaving, go to Miami, never coming back here, blah, 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 blah. And then going to Boston, like, I hate the cold, like, Adrian, we have to move somewhere cold. Or like, let's say an emotional decision could be you divorcing your husband because you hate how we have to live in the cold together.
Could you imagine? I divorced Adrian because I don't want to live in Boston.
I mean, if you got so frustrated, you could.
Well, they still have control over that decision. They decide to cut their hair. Yes, you might not have control over whether you get broken up with or not, but that's still an event that triggers an emotion. The emotion can be, I need a drastic change, and that drastic change, your immediate first thought could be, I'm going to cut my hair. That could be the best thing for somebody. I've been happy so many times when I've decided to cut my hair, change my hair color, but it could also be a bad decision. And I think it goes to say that just because you have an emotional reaction that makes you change something or make a decision rapidly, it doesn't mean it's always bad. I've made a lot of great decisions out of that emotional place, but I think the overall thing is emotions can drive us to make decisions. They don't always end up good or bad. Like Victoria said, the haircut can be really good. The tattoo can feel really liberating. I know whenever I was in college, I got a tattoo in the middle of finals because I was so frustrated. I was ready for a change. I needed things to change. And I walked out of a final where I felt that way. That was my current state of emotion. And someone's like, hey, we're going to the tattoo shop. Ashley, do you want to come? And I said, 100%, I'm getting a tattoo right now. And now I have a tattoo. And that's not to say I regret the tattoo or it was a bad decision, but it was an emotional reaction kind of decision.
I think what I'm trying to say, I didn't say clearly, is like that is an emotional reaction decision, but the decision making process that we're bringing, you don't always have to bring to necessarily this smaller decision.
Yeah.
Like it's okay to have those and it's okay to still feel those. We're working on these bigger ones that are completely life-changing decisions and bigger ones that you might face on like a weekly or monthly basis, not necessarily like big thing happened, small little thing, like a haircut, like your hair can grow back. I mean, it really ain't that big of a deal. 90%
Victoria clearly has not had trauma with her hair because I have had so much hair trauma that it feels so big.
What's your hair trauma? I mean, I got out of a breakup and I cut it.
Oh, like people dying.
Remember, I
like
used to sit on my hair.
Well, people like dyeing my hair wrong colors or like all those kinds of things.
Oh, no, I haven't
like,
had that.
Yeah, like getting the wrong shade of blonde and looking like my hair is orange, like crying after that. So, yeah, those are big decisions. But the thing that I would argue too is yes, this model applies to big decisions like should I go this route in my business? Should I change my partner? Should I change my career? Should I change where I'm living? Should I take this big opportunity or not? But if you can learn how to master this process that we're going to talk about on the big decisions, then for those small emotional reactions that you have, you'll be able to go through that process much faster.
A lot faster.
Yeah. So for example, like I didn't have the emotional capacity to sit down and think through. Also, my brain wasn't fully developed in college to think through if I was going to get a tattoo, if that was going to be a good idea or a bad idea. I just wanted it, so I did it. Versus maybe now if I had something happen in my life, for example, we've been just burning our businesses to the ground. Maybe if I was in college and I decided to burn a business to the ground, my emotional reaction would be like, hey, let me get a tattoo. I've been really wanting a tattoo lately because I love signifying it for change. But now because I have a better understanding of how I make decisions, I'm kind of flowing through it more and doing the process that we're going to talk about. I'm thinking through why I want one, what it's going to mean, where I want it, what it's going to signify. And so it's just, you just learn how to make decisions better when you use it on a big scale, but you can use it for tiny ones too, is what I would argue. Now let's dive into the intuitive decision pathway is what we're calling it for now. Name TBD. TBD.
TBT.
TBD.
Oh, Throwback Thursday. Yeah.
No, TBD.
I know.
Yeah,
I'm being annoying.
Okay, anyways, so first let's break down what it is and then we can dive into each part. So in our initial way that people usually make decisions, it's event happens, triggers an emotion, you have a reaction or a decision is made. But if we break down a slower way of making a decision that feels more intuitive and rock solid and is kind of quote right every time instead of maybe like regretful, what happens is
let's say informed.
Yeah, way more informed. Because either way, you could make the right decision. So if you want to make an informed, intuitive decision.
Because you can make the wrong... Well, we'll talk about that. Informed decision.
And intuitive.
Good to do.
Anyways, okay, so event happens in our new model, the intuitive decision pathway. An event happens that triggers an emotion. And then what happens is you begin to investigate that emotion, wondering what that is, what it looks like. We have different methods of investigating it. And then from there, you kind of narrow down into options based on what that emotion is telling you. And those options basically become your decisions. And then you make your decision by leveraging your style of intuition to decide what's going to happen next. And that's where we get to that grounded feeling, that sureness, that informed intuitive decision, because if you use your intuition and you know what your intuition style is, you'll come out with something that feels exciting, that feels clear, that feels like a solid path forward, which is why it's the intuitive decision pathway. It gives you the solid, clear path forward.
Yes. Exactly. All that.
Solid. First, let's talk about the emotions that kind of signal you have a decision to be made, because I don't think a lot of people talk about that.
The emotions or the intuitive thought, or like the trigger. Wait, what?
Well, like, so we can talk about in all of those aspects, because essentially what happens is something happens that either triggers something that feels like an emotion, that feels like an intuitive download. For everyone, it's going to feel different based on how much they understand about themselves. So if you're someone who maybe doesn't really understand your intuition or how it connects with you, something is going to happen that might make you feel some kind of emotion: frustrated, unsure, uneasy, cringy, all of those things. And that might be a sign that it's time to make a decision. Or if you're more in touch with your intuition, you might clearly get a message in your brain that says, I don't want to do this thing anymore. And that's the thing that triggers you to explore.
I guess so. Like, we can use the example we used to figure this out, which was us not wanting, or me, it started as me, not wanting to do interviews on the podcast, but I didn't realize that was what the thought was leading to. And so the first thing that happened is we did 2 interviews. And when I did mine, it felt so amazing. It was great. I had a fun time. But after the interview, I felt really drained and emotionally exhausted, which is like fine, but it's also like that interview was 15 minutes and that was with somebody that I love and that I knew. And if it's not, and it didn't go well, and if it was for even longer, how would I be able to always recover from that on the podcast? And I wasn't aware of that at the time, but I was like, this is gonna be a lot. And at first I was like, okay, you need to prepare for all of this coming. And then when I was editing Ashley's interview, I was like, oh my God, it's so great. And I love this interview. But I was getting that exhaustion, feeling it back. And I was like, shit, I'm getting this again.
Right.
Okay.
And so that's that first feeling. And for Victoria, she had no idea what that meant at the time. And this like was months, maybe a month later, that you tied it into the decision that had to be made. And so your first emotion could be anything. Yours was emotional exhaustion. And I think the key here for you when it's a big decision and you're not sure what the decision is yet is it showed up multiple times. You felt emotionally exhausted after your interview. You felt emotionally exhausted after editing my interview. And so I think when you're having continuous emotions pop up, it's little signals from your body and your brain and your intuition saying, hey, we should check this thing out. And I mean, that's even happened to me in my business before I burnt everything to the ground. I had so many times where I didn't know that it would lead to me wanting to rip apart all of my offers and create brand new offers. But I kept getting things like, oh, I'm tired of working on this. I wish I could do something else. I feel really tired. I feel burnt out. I feel drained. And like Victoria, our brain usually immediate response is like, okay, how do I recover from this? How do I make this better? And so you went into the story of the line of, I need to prepare for this. I need to get in the right mindset. I need to whatever. Same thing with me. I'm like, oh, I'm burnt out from my business. My first reaction wasn't, oh, let me burn all my offers to the ground. It was, okay, let me reduce my schedule. Let me just push through it. Let me be stronger, stop complaining, whatever. And so we get these intuitive nudges from our emotions or from however we receive information. And a lot of times we just try to logic it away instead of doing what we really need to do in the process, which is investigate what is that feeling, especially if that feeling is coming up more than one time.
And I think something that can lead us to make these emotional decisions is, oh, I'm feeling like this because this is happening. And so then I need to make this decision. And that's kind of what the emotional process can feel like. And so when we take that and we take the logic out of it, because there's not always logic in emotions right away, and you need to investigate the emotion, and you're not always going to know it right away. And that's okay. We got to go to our second thoughts is I had that emotion 2 times. And then I was saying, okay, I need to figure something out about this. And yeah, my thought during that process was still, you're going to need to figure out a way through this. But I was taking time to investigate the process. And so I was like, maybe it's the type of interview I'm doing and I need to shift the format of it and make it more enjoyable for me. And so I went on a month-long journey of investigation, which is the next step, which we'll get into, of listening to so many podcast interviews, which led me down a rabbit hole of me only like the interviews that was basically when a co-host met through a friend of a friend through this person, and then they met the third time, and then they finally hit it off, and then they just had the greatest fucking interview that you've ever heard of. And you're like, that was so amazing. That meant a lot to me. There was so many great words and everything. a lot of the interviews, I was just like, this was boring. And
Yeah.
I was like, and I had this thought of like, oh my God, are people going to think I'm just going to put this boring content out? And once again, making it about me and putting emotions upon myself. And I was getting really frustrated and annoyed with it all.
Yeah. And so that's the other thing to note is in this investigation process, after, let's say, the event happens that triggers an emotion, now we investigate why we're feeling emotionally exhausted or what we're going to have to do to make this better. There's a part of the process where you just have to consume information. Victoria's way of investigating was, okay, I'm going to have to learn how to do great interviews. What does a great interview mean to me? And I think there was conflict for you in the investigation process because you were realizing slowly that you didn't love interviews. And so the conflict was feeling frustrated and annoyed. And it's like almost how we talk about in the podcast. Many times we've said, ask yourself why 6 times and you'll get to the root of whatever, maybe more. It's the same thing with this investigation process. Okay, you're feeling emotionally exhausted. Why? Maybe you're doing the wrong kind of interview style. Okay, let's go check out other kinds of interviews. Okay, you're getting annoyed by these interviews. Why? And if Victoria reflected in that point, maybe she didn't have, I don't think you did, but it probably helped talking it out with someone. She was, if we look back, she was getting frustrated because she didn't want to do interviews because she didn't like them. And she didn't know that yet, but that is where the emotion was leading her. So when you're investigating a decision that you're making, it's okay to just continue the emotional pathway, to continue feeling emotions and not having a reason for them until you get to the place where it makes more sense.
And I was also looking at it from the sense of the interviewer and the interviewee were vibing really well, and that was going well. And I was looking at all of these from the interviewer side, not being interviewed, which is where a lot of my frustration was coming from that Ashley's talking about, that I didn't understand at that time because I was still working through this and making sense of it in real time. And that's why it takes time to process this stuff, and that you cannot always do this in one day. Sometimes you can if it's a little bit of a smaller decision and you have all the resources
and you know what the decision is you're about to make.
But sometimes you don't. And so I didn't understand. And I was actually, it's funny that anger was one of that, because with my not self theme is anger. And so whenever I say anger, I say, okay, I need to look into that deeper. But also to the sense of, I was always angry at the interviewer, not necessarily the interviewee. Which is interesting.
Well, it's probably because you want to be interviewed. You don't want to be the interviewer.
Well, that's what we found out in the end, but
she didn't know that.
I didn't know that at the moment.
And she didn't even know that for a while because your investigation continued. Investigating can happen in so many different ways. It can happen in the form of researching the way you did, Googling things, expanding your mind to see what's possible in different settings. It can also happen through conversations with people where you're bouncing ideas and possibilities around or exploring an emotion. It can also happen in just solo reflecting, journaling, meditating, understanding your brain, asking yourself the kind of powerful questions a life coach might ask you to figure out where you're headed. So, Victoria, in your investigation process, kind of what happened next?
So I went from like investigating on research to then investigating internally, and I realized like I wasn't happy, this wasn't going to work for me, but I wasn't really sure what to do or say, and I was nervous to tell Ashley. So then Ashley brought up like, okay, let's get back on that interview thing. Let's reach out to people and everything. And I'd done so much research of who we wanted, and I liked all these people, and I would love to get to know all of them. But then I was like, it's not right. And I just felt so taken back. And so Ashley wrote a script for me to reach out to them and everything. And I was excited to do that. But the day she sent me that script, internally, I was like, I can't do it. But I wasn't ready to say that to her. And I was like, I'll do this tomorrow. And I was just like, I just can't do this. We're going to have to figure this out, Victoria. We're going to talk to her tomorrow on the podcast. We got to figure this out. And so after the podcast we recorded, I was like, so I can't do this. And I was like, I hate doing interviews. I love being the interviewee, but I also think this is so much work. And
well, what's interesting,
I don't know if it was what we wanted at the time.
Yeah.
How did I bring it up? Do you remember?
Because I don't think it was it about the interviews at first?
Being the interviewer, and I was like, is it ADHD or is it me? And keeping on track and having the right questions and everything. And
Yeah,
I
because I
love
think
really good journalist questions, but I don't feel like I have that skill inside of me. And that was nerve-wracking for me. And I think that's actually how I brought it up.
it was too, because I think it was more investigative. It wasn't a decision that you had made that you were talking to me about. You were saying, oh, like, we were talking about what it would be like to interview people. And yeah, you were like, is it ADHD? Do I need to further develop this skill to get good at it? And we basically explored it more. And I imagine what happened, if I think about it, was I probably asked more questions about how you were feeling to understand it, which probably drew out more emotions, which eventually led us to options. We could either do interviews and get better at our skills. We could not do interviews at all ever, or we could do interviews in the sense that we would go on and be guests on different podcasts.
Yeah, and we talked around the fears of like, okay, I felt like I had to do interviews to expand and to grow and everything. But in the sense of like how I always wanted to do businesses, I'm just going to do the things that I want to do. And sure, maybe like, Ashley teaches how to do cold DMs and everything and that program that I was in Nine to Freedom. But I was like, I'm not doing this. And she was like, okay, then you're just going to have to go harder on another way. And I was like, that's fine, because it's going to be a way that I enjoy more. So it's not going to feel as hard, where cold DMs felt like literally pulling teeth from me. And so I was like, okay, it's the same thing for us. We're just going to have to go harder in another way. And it's not necessarily like harder, but we're just going to have to put a little bit more effort towards that direction. And so we're like, let's go get interviewed and let's have things to be interviewed on. And let's go talk like this. And let's just be on that. We don't have to plan those things. And I was like, that sounds good and comfortable to me in that time. That whole thing can still change and everything. But that's kind of the decision we went through. And I was nervous. A part that we skipped is there's a time where it is to make the decision. And I was really nervous to say out loud to Ashley that I didn't want to do interviews until I'd said it.
Yeah, and I think that part of the decision-making process, right after you investigate and you have options, that nervous feeling, fear, doubt, whatever, is very common. It doesn't mean it's going to happen in every decision, but it's very common that this is essentially too why you hear a lot of people talk about intuition or fear. Is it intuition or fear? Because you do have some fear, you do have some nerves, you do have some uneasiness before you decide on a pathway. But what's really helpful is, as we talked about in the beginning of this episode, is when you're presented with options of what you're going to do next, is to tap into your style of intuition. So if Victoria's style of intuition is her emotions, and we know that her intuition connects to her through her emotions, that means in what she just said, what's going to feel best for her. If she thinks about going on a podcast and being interviewed for herself, how does that feel? What kind of emotions will that bring up? If she has guests on our podcast, how is that going to make her feel? What emotions is that going to bring up? And if she taps into that and finds emotions that feel good, that connect her to her intuition and give her a grounded feeling, a sense of clarity, maybe even a sense of excitement, I think that's how you knew that not having guests on our podcast was the right move, because your emotions led you to that place.
Yeah, and basically the two parts that I kind of go through, and it went a little different on this decision because I was talking out in real time with Ashley, is I'll normally come to a place where I feel nervous and I'll have, like, let's say 2 to 4 options on the table. And what I normally do is I visualize myself kind of being in each of those situations and kind of think of what might it be like, what are some problems that might come up or whatever, and kind of optimize anxiety in a way and go through those positions and what feels the best and what excites me and what feels right to me. And guess what? Sometimes that decision's wrong and you can always change and whatever, because you have this process and you can feel confident in being able to make decisions for you. And so it's just making informed at that point. It's not necessarily right or wrong. And at that time, it felt right to me that we're not bringing interviews on. We are going on to other places or whatever, and we're going to go off of that strategy for a bit. And, we'll see how that goes for the next little bit before we go on. And so taking time to know, how do you feel those decisions and what feels right? Because for Ashley, it's not necessarily a feeling. For you,
Yeah.
you said it kind of just happens inside your head.
Yeah.
And
Well, and
I'm
I
not
think,
supposed to think with my head.
yeah. Well, and intuition aside, it can be really beneficial to anybody, no matter how your intuition talks to you, to do the process that Victoria talked about. And you said optimize your anxiety. And I think that's really important because your brain fears the unknown more than it fears the known. So if you just say, I'm going to start a business and that's the decision I'm going to make, and anything could happen and I don't know what's going to happen, your brain is going to be so afraid of starting that business. Versus if you take that event or that decision you're going to make and you go through every scenario possible, you're going to feed your brain all the scenarios and it's not going to fear it anymore. Because even if the worst thing happened, let's say, for example, Victoria did this too in her scenario where she said, okay, let's bring interviewees onto our podcast. And she imagined the worst case scenario. It was the worst person ever. They were horrible. They were mean. We got canceled because of it. Her brain wouldn't fear that decision because it already knew what would happen in the worst case scenario. And so even if you don't tap into your intuition through your emotions, that's a really important cycle to go through when you make decisions, especially life-changing ones, so your brain feels safe and secure in whatever path you choose.
And these nerves that we're talking about before making these decisions, these don't feel like life-threatening nerves. These are just nerves of, it's a new thing. It's just kind of a little nervous. It's just new nervous. It's not life-threatening nervous. And I encourage everyone to know the difference between those in your own body and what that feels like, because that can help you with this decision-making process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think it comes back to the idea of like what is fear versus what is intuition. Fear for me, whenever it's just my brain overreacting, it's like rapid thoughts, blah, 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 over and over again. But for me, when I know I'm making the right decision in that time, there's no right or wrong decisions. We just choose in this life and then, learn or don't learn or whatever. It just feels like silence to me, but maybe I'll still have butterflies, but like it feels good kind of butterflies. And we talked about different kinds of intuition. For me, it's like that where I'm nervous about a decision and those nerves sound like chaos in my brain. And it's basically my brain going, we could do this or that or this or that, and this will happen and that'll happen and what if. And then all of a sudden it'll just be like, nope, this is the path. This is the one. And it's just like, oh yeah, I know how to do that. And I don't know why I know it's that one or why I'm so sure. And it doesn't make sense, but I just know it's the right thing to do.
For me, the right one normally feels like there's a golden ball of light that's like in my stomach, and then it starts shining throughout my whole body. And that's when I know I've made the right decision.
That's really cute. Some other people have like gut reactions where they just like feel it in their gut. I don't know. I'm sure there's all kinds of different intuition that we could talk about and do a whole episode on. But if you know how your intuition connects with you, it makes that last end of the process a lot easier.
And so think of decisions. And if you don't know, and maybe these sound similar, but not necessarily 100% spot on for you, is think back to decisions where you really know that was the right decision for you in that moment, even if it doesn't feel like now it was, or you're like, what? Oh, that's so stupid. But in that moment, it felt so right. Well, actually, no. Think back to the ones that
turned out good.
Because that turned out good in that time. That felt, what am I saying? That felt good at that time. Use that as your key to, that's your intuition. Fuck, what did I just say?
I think what you're trying to say is, if you're trying to figure out what your intuition is or how it talks to you, think back to a time when you've made a decision and it did turn out well, because whatever that feeling you felt is the signal that things will turn out well. Again, just find your own patterns. We always talk about how our lives are these great big science experiments and we're just learning. If you can find your own patterning, you can make this a lot easier. If you want a more in-depth way of looking at this, listen to the other decision-making episode I talked about intuition on earlier, back solo episode. Go listen. I'll link it in the show notes probably. But your intuition talks to all of us in different ways. Think about the time you made a decision. What happened? Did it turn out well? What was that feeling that you had? Because then you can understand your own patterning.
Well, it's also interesting because I'm thinking of, okay, when I dated one person who was a great person, the feelings I had, I thought they were the same feelings when I started dating another person who was not good for me, but they were not, but I was confused and I was trying to pretend like they were the same when they weren't.
What was different that you missed?
I didn't eat for a month.
Yeah, I would say
Which
that's
was the
not
anxiety that I
good.
wasn't paying attention to. And so pay attention to where that anxiety comes through. So anxious thoughts are not necessarily anxiety that's taking over your life. If you cannot, like in the first one, my nervous system was still regulated. I was still having a hard time and I would sometimes not eat because I was just really nervous, but also because school was really hard at that time. I was not eating even more. The second one, that was not a good decision. And so now if I ever can eat, I don't, that's not a place I'll go down, but we've gotten better.
Yeah, if we're not eating because of a boy, it's not the right boy. I'm just gonna say. I love eating with my husband. I will always be eating food.
Yeah.
Well, I even think about when I was dating the first like long-term relationship I had in high school. It was like 3 years long, and in month 2 of us being together, in my journal, my little high school diary, I said, I don't think I like him. I don't know if we should be together. I don't really like him at all. And then we dated for 3 years after I wrote that month 2, and it's like, hello, here's a piece of information. Do you want to use it to make a decision? No, you want to break your heart and just like cry for a year. Okay, cool. You can do that too. But that just goes to show like your intuition's always going to talk to you. Mine, like I said, shows up from my brain. So like my intuition was like, hey girl, you're having this thought. You're having this feeling. You want to explore it? No, you don't want to investigate it? You're fine. Your brain's not developed. Go get some heartbreak, learn some things, circle back. You'll come back to me later, said my intuition.
See, mine came, actually, I was talking about this in therapy, like, before we were recording, and I brought up a situation where I wanted to say what I wanted and voice my opinion and whatever it was, say that's intuitive or not, but I didn't feel like I could because of past trauma, not necessarily because of that person. And then, during the whole time, I had an inner battle with myself and my trauma. And then I was just mad at myself, but mad at myself because then I couldn't express my anger because the anger is not towards that person, so they won't understand. So then I just avoid the entire situation and the person and just walk out because it was all in my head. And that's on trauma.
And I'm like, so what? What would you do with that?
Okay, here's the situation here is the entire situation that was at hand, all right? I was hungry and my blood sugar was low. And I just wanted dinner. And then we made crepes. And I didn't want to eat crepes because then that was going to make my blood sugar spike and then crash. And I don't have diabetes, but I do have like a low blood sugar. And so it's just something I got to watch out for, whatever. And I really wanted to say I wanted that, but I felt like I was being needy and annoying for saying I wanted to get dinner. Also because I didn't know if they were hungry. So then I got mad at myself for not expressing my needs, but then felt like I couldn't express my needs, and then just cried about it, and then just walked out.
And so if we applied this to the emotional or the intuitive pathway, what would you have done differently?
Now I would not be in a situation where I cannot express myself, but I would also say, hey, I need dinner. And I would get myself dinner, and I would not make decisions in that time because you cannot make decisions when you're hungry. That is another time we do not make decisions, everybody. You do not make big decisions when you are hungry or you're tired.
Facts.
You do not have your best self at that time. And if you think you can because you have ADHD and you're good on your feet, go take a nap and then make a better decision.
But yeah,
the process there would have been one, saying I wanted dinner and asking if they wanted dinner first, and if they didn't, then going and leaving and getting myself dinner because I needed dinner.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
The crepes turned out good though. It was a school project also. Art school, baby. Don't even ask.
Oh well.
Prompts for the the investigation period. So Should we do that?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. So for the investigation period, so there's the research phase, which you can do on yourself, but the research phase is where we can kind of get stuck in analysis paralysis. And so that's something to watch out for here, is kind of not necessarily give yourself a time frame, but make sure after, let's say, a week or two of researching, you at least go and talk to yourself about it in maybe a journal, or talk to yourself in a camera, or talk to another person to be a sounding board, however you get to understand things best, so that you can help get yourself out of that investigation period. Because if you stay in your head, you're always just going to stay in that analysis paralysis thing. And so that's why we like the conversations with other people or with yourself. And so with myself, it can be like, okay, I've done a bunch of research. What have I learned? I've learned that these are the types of interviews I like. I was angry, but what was I angry at? And so processing the emotions that you were feeling at that point, and not necessarily logicalizing it, but understanding where they came from. You can say, is there something I haven't learned yet that I need to learn? You can ask yourself, where are you feeling at then with those decisions or with these options? Do you need to find more options? Do none of those options even look appealing to you? Because sometimes that can take longer. Can also start talking to another person. And so what like Ashley might be asking me in that situation is, how do you feel about that? How has that gone in the past? What are some things that are drawing you to this emotion? What other good questions are there?
My favorite question asked is like, what do you wish could happen? What do you want to happen? If anything could be possible, what would life look like? If I think about this decision-making pathway, whenever I was deciding if I wanted to do a life coaching certification or not, the event that triggered this emotion for me was I hated my 9 to 5. I was crying on my way home from work every single day. And then I thought, well, I need to do something. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I think this is a great example, this and burning business to the ground, because these are long, drawn-out decision-making processes that I didn't have the answer to right away. After I knew I wanted to quit my job, I had to investigate and think about what the heck I wanted to do with my life, what was my purpose, what was I passionate about, what did I want life to look like. These are all questions I had to ask myself. What inspired me? When did I feel my best? What did I like the best? Where did I get joy from? And I didn't even get to life coaching right away. The first thing I thought was, okay, I'm going to become a cycle instructor and I'm going to learn how to do indoor cycling because I know I like motivating people. Let me do that. And so sometimes there can be decisions and then you repeat the process, right? I went through the process. Oh, I hate my 9 to 5 job. I'm going to investigate, ask myself all those questions. Okay, I'm kind of nervous about becoming a cycle instructor. Can I do it? All right, I'm going to do it. Decision. But then I come back and another event happens and it's like, well, I'm still in my 9 to 5. Yes, cycling is fun, but I'm still not fulfilled. Okay, we investigate again. And now I'm learning, I love cycling. What am I getting out of cycling that I really enjoy? What am I learning from this? What do I wish I could be doing if I could do anything with my time? And we continue this thought process, make a decision, and then repeat. And it's kind of just like the decision-making cycle or the purpose cycle where you're constantly figuring out things, and you might make tiny decisions along the way to making a bigger decision. And it's how your intuition is always giving you little information. If you just keep following it and saying yes to it, you'll probably end up to the conclusion.
I mean, it's literally like I was just talking about this in therapy, is whenever I live on autopilot, that's when I'm the least unhappy. And whenever I make sure every so often I take the pedal off and check in with decisions and see how I feel about them, that's when I feel the best. And that's when the best decisions come from. And so, you can turn the pedal on of analyze and researching, but then turn the pedal off of, okay, what's going on? And kind of with the purpose cycle, with the same thing of, okay, we make some effort and then we got to take it off. We got to make a decision. And then we work on that decision. You take some action and then you analyze again, as this goes into that same process. And this basically goes inside that process in multiple of the steps because you're making that decision in that purpose cycle.
Right. And especially if a lifelong decision that you're making, Like, let's say, for example, it's, do I want to date this person anymore? Is it time for us to break up? And that's the decision you're making. And the reason that comes up is maybe you've been feeling, let's say my not self theme is bitter, and you've been feeling really bitter about the relationship. You feel like your partner never does anything right, and they've just not been caring about your emotions. And so you want to investigate, what is this bitter feeling? Why am I feeling bitter? And this might not be physical research like Victoria did about interviews. This might be, why am I feeling so bitter? What behaviors have they done that make me feel like they don't care about me? What are steps that I can take to make my feelings known? What are those things that I'm feeling? What do I want to communicate to this person? And maybe you end up with some decisions. Drastically break up with them, or communicate your feelings. And maybe you communicate your feelings and that was the decision that needed to be made. Maybe everything gets better, but maybe you communicate your decisions and then a week later you're still feeling pissed off about the relationship. Now we come back and we're like, what is this emotion? Let me investigate it. And now you get to another layer of decisions, and maybe that time you do decide to break up. But it's this constant, I think a lot of times with decision making, we feel like it has to be this big, massive decision right away, and that's just not true. There are sometimes a lot of tiny decisions that have to be made to make a big decision, and that's okay because life is an experiment. You have to test things out. You have to try. You have to learn. It might be hard to see, like Victoria said, that the person that she was with wasn't making her eat, and so she should not be with that person. That wasn't aware to her right away, and there were other things that had to happen before you could understand that, and I think it's all important part of the process.
And I wasn't able to honor myself at that time. That's why that was happening. And then because some things happened and I stepped back and was able to, then when they came back, I was like, no, that's not a good situation for me. And I was able to honor myself because I was able to step back and look at that where I wasn't able to in the beginning. And sometimes it's really hard with ADHD because we can get hyper fixated on it. And so we're locked in on that decision. It can feel like there's no other way out. And that's when it can be easy for us to make those instant emotional decisions that don't lead us with the greatest results that we want.
Yeah, so true. And I will note that, we're talking about this purpose cycle and this purpose cycle, the decision-making pathway, and it sounds so easy and logical, right? You have an emotion and then you explore it. Why are you feeling that? What do you want to happen? Make a decision about it. It feels so easy. But if you look at all the emotions that happen before you make a decision, it's not that easy. It probably feels more like a roller coaster.
And don't think we haven't made some fucking terrible decisions. Like, I dated that guy. Why did I date that guy?
I dated my high school boyfriend for 3 years. When month 2, I said, I don't think I like him. What the heck?
And it's just, that's what I did at the time, and that's all I could. And you got to give yourself a break on that of, okay, I did that then. I know more now. How can I use that knowledge now?
Totally. Yeah, but I don't know. It's weird because it feels like it makes so much sense, but in real time, making decisions can feel really hard.
And it's also, this is interesting, is I realized a lot of my life, I always thought the perfect life for me is I don't have to make decisions. I don't want to make all these decisions. I'm so exhausted by all the decisions I was having to make. Even today, I was like, I'm so exhausted of having to do things my own way. Yet that makes me the happiest, and it's okay. I just need to go slower, and I need to take a break.
Ooh.
And I want to make these decisions, and I want to have autonomy in my life. I want to have agency over my life. I'm just tired, and I need to go slower, and I need to be kinder to myself, and I'm pushing too fast too soon.
And that one goes out to every single business owner I have ever effing met that was like, I just want someone to tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do. No, you don't. You don't want anyone to tell you what to do.
So much of my first year in therapy with this woman, I'll be like, can you just tell me the answer? And sometimes I still am like, look, you just need to tell me the answer because there's nothing inside of me right now that has the ability to make this decision, and you just need to do this. Did I ask my therapist once how to text somebody? Yes.
That's That's okay. Well, and no,
She
it's
said
just,
that was the worst session, and I was like, actually, that was your best session ever.
oh my gosh. Well, and it's just like, yes, there are times like that where you're just like, give me the answer. But so often, especially in business owners, as someone who's been a business coach, you just run into people, doesn't matter what level of business they're at. They're hiring coaches, they're enrolling in masterminds, they're buying courses because they're like, somebody give me the answer. Somebody give me the answer. I've seen so many people with successful online businesses who don't know shit about marketing or sales be successful because they just did whatever they wanted. They made decisions for themselves. They figured out what they liked, why they liked it. They tried things. They made mistakes. They grew really fast. The people who grew the fastest, who are the big TikTok stars, you think they were in some little mastermind? Do you think they were in some coaching program? But no. So they,
some of them.
well, yes. But anyways, for different reasons than someone giving them the answer. Sometimes you need people to help you facilitate your decision-making process in a space like therapy or like a true coaching experience or community where no one is pressuring you to make a decision, no one's giving you answers, but you're learning how to decide to make decisions for yourself. And that's where a lot of business owners get stuck, is they're looking for someone to give them the answers. They get the answer and they don't like it, or they don't like how they have to do it, and then they get mad because all they should have done in the first place is listen to themselves. And I think what you said is key, is the reason why so many business owners are looking for the answer instead of just making decisions for themselves is because they're tired, because they're burnt out, because they've been going for so long and they're exhausted and they're thinking, somebody just tell me what to do. And I get it. We've been there.
We also want a scapegoat.
Yeah, but you know
to
what?
blame somebody else for when it goes wrong.
Right. So like, what if we just like explored that emotion a little bit of the fact that you like, let's use, I just want someone to tell me what to do as the trigger event. Why do you want someone to tell you what to do? Let's investigate that feeling. What are you going to get? What do you wish you had? Why can't you make decisions yourself? Because I bet if you use this decision-making process, instead of just saying, okay, I don't want to figure it out myself, I'm going to go buy something, you'll come up with a better answer that gives you more autonomy, like Victoria said, that gives you more power, that gives you more freedom to create the life that you want to live, instead of constantly just taking whatever people tell you is the life you should have.
Exactly. And I wrote this down today. I always wanted no issue, but now I realized I always want to have issues because I always have the ability to figure anything out that comes my way, and I love problems.
I love problems.
And it's not that I love, chaos and drama in my life, but I love when problems come my way, and I do not have decision fatigue. And if I have decision fatigue from ADHD from making too many decisions that day, we are not making any decisions, okay, everybody? You are not making a decision when you have decision fatigue.
Literally me at the end of working, Adrian's like, what's for dinner? And I'm like, I don't care. You just pick food, you put it in front of me, and that's what's happening today. Because I did it. I did all the decisions I could do in a day. That's all I got. That was me last Friday. I made so many decisions in a single day. I literally cried at the end of the day because I had it. And then Adrian was like, what's for dinner? And I was like, I couldn't tell you because I did so many adulting things, as someone say. I set so many boundaries. I told so many people no, and I just need to go cry and let that out. And food should appear in my lap. Thank you.
And it's okay when that happens, and that's completely normal. I mean, we don't want to get to that decision fatigue.
No, I just made too many decisions.
But it happens, and so that's okay, and we know what we need to do to pick ourselves up from that place, and so it's okay to call in help and whatever. But it's also good to know that during that time, you should not be making even more decisions.
Totally.
And it's okay to back off and say, hey, I need another day.
Mm-hmm. I need another day on figuring out dinner, so it's your problem tonight. Me every night.
But that's the key, is not making those irrational decisions. And, in that moment, you could have started a screaming match with him.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't, but it could.
What are some wrapping up notes for us?
Okay, here's my final takeaway, just a breakdown of the process so you can remember it and use it. Step 1, something happens. It's an event. It's an emotion. It's a thought in your mind, and it makes you question, or it should make you question. whatever the emotion is, especially if the emotion is showing up more than one time. Next thing is, instead of having a reaction and making a decision right away, we want to investigate the emotion, the feeling, the thought, whatever way that looks. Sometimes that's researching, having a conversation, doing some solo exploration, and then you might have some nerves around the options that you discover. And then from there, you're going to decide using your intuition, whatever way that speaks to you. And that is how you make intuitive decisions and not reactional decisions.
And with this knowledge, you have the skills and the ability to practice this and make this a practice in your life so that you can make informed decisions and you can handle any problem that comes your way. The greatest thing I've ever learned is that problems are okay. I do want problems because a life without problems, that's going to get really boring really fast. Remember that? And when you remember that you have the ability to make any decision and do anything that comes your way, that's when you are truly unstoppable and you will feel on top of the world. Because let me tell you, I feel on top of the world right now with that ability. And it's a good thing to strive for.
Wait, one more thought.
What?
I was journaling on this today, and I was journaling about me. I'm just so mad that everyone still hires business coaches. I'm bitter because I don't want to be a part of that world anymore. But I do, but in a different way of helping people. Anyways, I was journaling on this, and I love that you said you love having problems, and it's so powerful to be able to make decisions, because I was literally journaling today. If people could just see that if they learned how to trust their intuition and make decisions and understand themselves and all the things that they enjoyed in their purpose, if they could figure out those things, they would never need to spend money on things that they don't need ever again. Yes, they could if they made learning lesson, all of those things. But imagine you wouldn't have to buy into a Facebook ad program or a marketing program or this thing that's the secret to the next 100K or this thing that's going to give you the trending TikTok sounds. Because if you truly knew how to make decisions and you trusted your intuition and you were living in purpose, you wouldn't have to do those things. You would find a rooted power within yourself. And that is true power, to be able to make decisions and trust that you're going to make the right one because you found it in yourself. And I think it's so cool because literally I have this necklace that says everything I need is within me. And that is the point of this. If you can master this decision-making flow pathway, you have power for the rest of your life to tackle anything that comes your way. And maybe, yes, you'll need help along the way. And maybe, yes, you will have to buy something because that's where your intuition will lead you.
You will have to research things. I had to buy 9 to Freedom because I had no idea how the fuck to market myself.
And you learned things you liked and you learned things you didn't like, and then you did it whatever fucking way you wanted. And that's all what business is about. And, even me, I've invested in different memberships and programs, and some of them were amazing, and some of them literally just scammed me out of a shit ton of money, and I'm still dealing with that bullshit. But, that's okay because it's all lessons. And the more you practice making decisions and trusting you're going to make the right one, the more powerful you'll feel every time you decide something.
Exactly. And so don't be scared of decisions. Take ownership of the process and get comfortable in the process so that you feel confident that whenever something comes your way, you are ready to tackle anything because you can handle it.
Hell yeah. You can handle it.
That's the goal in life. It's not to have no problems. It's to be confident with your problems. And comfortable with your problems.
And non-reactional with your problems. In the beginning we talked about, a big problem happened, everything's ruined, I'm gonna burn it all to, emotional reaction, make a decision, whatever. Even today I was thinking about how I got sick, and months ago I would have thought it was the end of the world that I got sick and I had to slow down and my business would be ruined. The peace that I felt over the past couple of days, I have felt so much peace. I didn't think about money a single time. I did not think about content I was vibing. And to be presented with that as a problem, quote unquote, some people would say, and just to vibe through it and just continually make the decision, because we had to decide to rest and not to work, I feel so confident in that decision. And I felt so good about it the entire time. And it's 444, and that's just a really cool place to be.
I didn't even think about working because I physically was unable.
Good decision, still, nonetheless.
So, good things. All good things. I think that's a really good note to end on. And let us know if you have questions. We can put out a graphic on this and everything for you all, because I understand with ADHD, a lot of us are visual learners. And
Your
so
girl, it's me. I'm not
we're
auditory
here to
at
support you.
all.
And
Anyways,
so if you're having a hard time listening to this and understanding this, I mean, you're at the end. But, like, go look at a graphic, because,
it'll be on Instagram.
yeah.
So follow us on the Living Adventures Co. Instagram account. Follow us on TikTok for clips and snippets before and after episodes come out. And we will see you on the next one.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.